Ken Eccles is on vacation this week. He'll be back on Monday, October the 1st, and I'm Art Childry filling in. Hope that you've learned something from the show so far. We are going to take your phone calls in just a few minutes. If you'd like to, we've already got one person on hold, and we're going to ask them to stand by. And we've got one line open right now. There's my email address, talktomarknow@outlook.com. If you'd like for me to email, if you'd like for me to read an email or a question or a comment, I'll be glad to do that. But Sheriff's got something he wanted to mention first.
Yesterday, this kind of goes in line with the Sheriff's initiative, but yesterday President Trump to the UN stated we commit to fighting the drug epidemic together. And he was talking with some of the global members of the United Nations. Mm-hmm. And he said the President said, the call is simple. The President said, reduce drug demand, cut off the supply of illicit drugs, expand treatment, and straighten international cooperation. And with that said, I kind of got a similar conversation with I talked to the Mexican Consulate General. Over the past 6 years, I've had 3 consulate generals. They're like the ambassador, and they're out of Raleigh, and they represent Mexico. They've come up, and I've had some good discussions. But the last consulate general came up last year. During the discussion, she said, Sheriff, I want to remind you one thing, is remember this. You have people that have a demand for a supply and demand. You have people that are demanding the drug here in the United States, and they have the supply in Mexico. So it both cause each other. You've got to affect both of those to reduce. We've got to reduce the demand and then go out to the supply here. Okay, but this was a message that was sent out by 300 plus sheriffs. I believe it's about 330 sheriffs. We sent out a message from the National Sheriff's Association to the dear members of Congress. Congress must act to pass legislation to secure our borders through enforcing immigration laws, tightening border security, support the replacement upgrades of current barrier and fencing, and construction of barriers along the U.S. and Mexico international boundary. As requested by those areas where it is needed, suspending or monitoring the issuance of visas to any place where adequate vetting cannot occur, end criminal cooperation, and shelter in cities, counties, and states, and have zero tolerance and increased repercussions for criminal aliens, people that are committing offenses that are here illegally in the country. Now, last week I sent this out to our Congressman Walker, Senator Tillis, and Senator Burr. Dear Congressman Walker, and also sent this out to the 2 senators. Please take a few moments to read the attached news release. It details information about crowdfunding about our website, sheriffswall.org, from the National Sheriff's Association to help fund construction of a border wall across the American southern border. I believe that in order to combat the opioid pandemic in America, we must secure our international borders, stop the flow of these deadly drugs into our communities. If Congress will not act, then we as America should. We all are seeing the damage these drugs have we've sworn to protect. Together with the help of that reduce the flow of opioids and other drugs into our country, make America safe again by starting at our borders. So that was sent out to our congressman last week, following a push out of this effort with the Fund Me page.
So you're basically your basic thing is we don't secure the borders, then a lot of the crime and the drugs and the things that are coming into our country are going to continue. But there are people, and I even saw this pointed out, somebody that said, well, what about Canada? There's a lot of territory on Canada.
Absolutely, the 3,900 miles on the northern border that needs to be better protected. But we have most of our drugs are coming through our international ports of entry and through our southern porous border.
So that's
where a lot of our folks needs to be. But you got to remember this: the first terrorists were captured trying to bring explosives across were coming across the Canadian border. So again, you can't ignore the 3,900 miles of border. But you also got a war going on below the 1,900 miles of border that's into Mexico. And then you have the countries Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras that are also having their own instabilities that are pushing people up toward the United States.
I'm going to read some comments to you.
Sure, go ahead.
And this one, I'm just going to read just in brief, and then we're going to take a break and then take the phone calls. One person says they will just tunnel under it, talking about the wall. They will just tunnel under it. You think so? Is that going to happen?
Sure, people can tunnel, but doing nothing and expecting better results is not going to happen. We've got to do something. We've got to make the effort to protect our borders. We've got to provide the infrastructure, the technology, and the manpower, boots on the ground, to protect America's borders. If we do that, we're going to have a better chance in stopping and slowing that flow of those dangerous drugs into our communities and from the ports of entry and also the open border and in between the border entry points.
And then Chris says, I thought Mexico was going to pay for the wall.
Well, again, Mexico may pay for certain things. Let's go back to this. Let's go back to this. The Border Security Initiative first. We've got to work on our drug demand and treatment for persons that are affected by addictions here in our country. We also need to commit the resources to working with our partners in Mexico to combat the drug cartels. So in essence, yeah, Mexico may have to pay from the military and law enforcement in those efforts to combat the drug problem in their country. But we also ought to commit, just like we did with Colombia and other countries, we need to commit to them to help them clean up that border area where people are dying every day.
All right, here's a question that just came in by email, and then we'll take a break.
Yes, sir.
Why would you not spend all the effort solving the unsolved murders in the county instead of worrying about a border that is thousands of miles away? It looks a lot like PR stuff, like the volunteer school resource officers, that means little to citizens.
Well, first of all, we've been very successful on our investigation on our homicide case, and I'm very proud of the investigators that work in that situation. And no case is closed, and it's still open until someone's brought to justice. What was the other question? The school resource officers?
The school resource officers.
Read that question one more time. Read that question,
the many unsolved murders in the county, instead of worrying about a border that's thousands of miles away, it looks like PR stuff, like the volunteer school resource officers, that means little to citizens.
Well, you know, that could be my child in school, and that could be your child in school when that person decides to go there and do harm to those children. If you paid attention to Sandy Hook and saw the tragedy that happened there, if you looked at what happened in Broward County last year, and you look at the frequencies of events around our country, I'm not going to wait till one child gets injured in this school district before I act. I'm acting now. I don't think it's a waste of time. I don't think it's a waste of effort. And it's my job as the sheriff and the chief law enforcement officers county to advocate for public safety and protecting our citizens here. But on the issue of the opioid and the drug epidemic that we're dealing with, we've got to start at the border. We've got to stop the flow at the border before it gets to our communities, because it's killing people in our communities. And that's not public relations. That's not a PR issue. That's public safety.
All right, we're going to take a break, and we will be back. We're going to take your phone calls. There you see the numbers at the bottom of the screen. If the numbers are busy when you call, just keep trying. We'll be back right after these messages.